Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to another episode of New Music Finds, where I like to collect together all the different things that I picked up over the past week, present it to you, give you a little bit of background on it. And I've only got 5 things this week. It wasn't a big week for me. Even though I'm actually feeling a lot better, I could head out to a record store. I just didn't. I didn't have the time. I chose to do other things. But I got 5 things here and it kept me musically interested for the whole week. So I'm going to get into that. I'll break it all down and explain it to you guys. But before we do, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on everything going on in the world of music, just like this, where we're talking about new music finds, the things I picked up this past week, maybe turn you on to something new or remind you about something cool you got in your own collection to go check out. So as I like to do, I always kick off with new releases, and I'm actually going to start for one that's about 2 weeks back, I think, because it took a little while for me to get it. It was back ordered through Amazon for quite a bit of time, and Anthony Coviello over at Sound Exchange could not get it in for me. I think it was back ordered for him as well, and I ultimately chose to order it from the UK and have it sent to me directly, and I got it before any other places got it in and available. So I'm actually glad that I did that. If you guys don't ever do that or think about doing that, those of you that like to use Amazon like I do, you can actually go to other countries' websites. You can go to amazon.co.uk and order from them as opposed to your normal one. If you just type in amazon.com, it's going to take you to wherever your local one is. And so being the US, that's going to pop up for me. But I also go to amazon.jp or whatever it is for Japan, and I'll order that stuff that way. It also cuts down on big markup charges. So you end up getting your CD plus the shipping cost, which is further away. And in my case, usually a couple dollars less that way. All right, something to think about. But anyways, what is it that I ordered like that? Well, the brand new Pattern Seeking Animals album, which is titled Friend of All Creatures. I actually really like this artwork on here. I find it very intriguing, something that definitely speaks to the world of what it is, which is progressive rock music. If you don't know who Pattern Seeking Animals are, it's, I believe, 3 of the guys, maybe 4 of the guys from Spock's Beard, and it's the most recent lineup. And I don't really know why Spock's Beard hasn't recorded anything in the last 5 years, but what have those guys been doing? They have been recording an album a year as Pattern Seeking Animals. And I have to say that I'm actually loving this stuff here, not just this album, but Pattern Seeking Animals more than I have been Spock's Beard. So I'm probably a bigger fan of this than Spock's Beard, even though that's where the guys come from. But either way, very good album. And out of all 5 of the Pattern Seeking Animal albums, so far, I think I like this one best, but album number 3, really good. That's the one that really cinched the deal for me. But every album has been really interesting and intriguing, and just one of those things that they're complex, but they're interesting, and I don't get bored with them. So if you're a progressive rock fan and for some reason have never checked out Pattern Seeking Animals, I highly recommend it. This one here being a cardboard package type thing. So yeah, I know, I like my jewel cases, but as long as they come in pristine condition, they're not bent up, they're not cut anywhere, I'm okay with it. I don't mind. I keep my CDs very protected and well and handled well and all that sort of stuff. So they don't get beat up for me. It's just if they arrive beat up. That's why I always like the jewel case. All right, so let's move into March 7th release day, this past Friday. Some cool things came out. First one up, you may have seen the full album review that I already did for it. The brand new Jethro Tull album, Curious Ruminant. It's their 24th studio album, 3rd in succession over the last 3 years, 2022, 2023, and now 2025 for this album. I can't believe that a band that didn't record an album for 23 years when they put out their 2022 album, that's how long it had been, over 2 decades, has now given us 3 albums in 3 years. I mean, utterly amazing in my opinion. Just love it. And so this one here, my initial gut reaction on this was that it was too mellow or just a very mellow album. And I felt a little disappointed after the first listen to it. But like a lot of these albums, there's so much hype and anticipation and desire and everything that a lot of times I find that I can be disappointed after the first listen, but once I let all of that stuff subside and I just go into it and give it a listen for what it is, that it is a brand new album from this band, and how does it sound on its own? Let's not compare it to something else. And a lot of times I will end up enjoying it far more at that point. So usually second, third, and fourth listens are where an album will grow for me. It's actually very rare that the very first listen I am pulled in thinking it is a phenomenal, great album. Sometimes that happens, but also sometimes those are the albums that I get bored with very quickly. If it connects with me immediately, there's not a lot after that to absorb. And so you want it to connect immediately, but I actually have found that for me, some of my favorite albums are the ones that take that time to grow. And this one didn't take all that long, but on its second and third listen, I really started to get into it. The second track on here, the title track, Curious Ruminant, was the first single, and it did nothing for me at the time. But I thought instead of trying to force myself to listen to it, I'm just going to wait. And when the album came out, the opening track on here, Puppet and the Puppet Master, did grab me. And I thought, okay, great. I am going to enjoy this. I do like this. And the second track, being that first single, title track, sounded a lot better as the second track. And then the rest of the album, same sort of thing. It all sounded much better in context. And oftentimes that's what I find with albums. I'm not a singles person. I can like a song one off, but I am an album person. And hearing an album in its totality oftentimes determines whether I like something by an artist or not. But this album here, very good stuff. If you want to hear a full album review, I have done it. I will leave a link in the description, but you can go check this out. It was posted on Sunday earlier this week. Okay, here's another one that I've actually done a full album review, and when I set out to do this, I thought it would just be a quickie little 3-minute thing, and it turned into a full album review just because I had a lot to say about it. I'm talking about the reissue of the Alan Parsons Project. This album here, Tales of Mystery and Imagination, subtitled with Edgar Allan Poe. So debut album from Alan Parsons Project. And I didn't think I was going to get into it as much as I did because I never liked the album before. What I found out during the course of all of this is the original 1976 mix of the album that has now been remastered and restored, whereas the copy that I had was a 1987 remix that had additional guitars and keyboards added and narration, and it was the narration that I always didn't like, and I had no idea there was an original version that didn't include all of that. So I popped this on, and first of all, I enjoyed it, and I thought, well, geez, that's really weird. But, my tastes are always changing and growing, and I hadn't listened to this album in some time, probably since I bought my box set that had all the albums in it. And it's okay, that's great, that's wonderful, but it just kind of kept growing on me, and I thought, this thing is really good. And as I did research on it in order to talk to you guys about it, I found out there was this 1987 remix, and I had that version, and I'd never heard this one, and I just loved it. I mean, it was just one of those things that was like, it was so cool to find and learn all that there was about Alan Parsons and this album and the debut and the remix and the different variations of it. That's what I live for. That's what I try to share with a lot of you guys out there. I know sometimes I hear things like, I don't need to hear the history, or I don't need to know that. I just talk about the music. But I think having all that context, all that added info makes the music itself so much more than it is. But anyway, This album, debut album, a remastered version of this and restored, 1976, has now come out on March 7th. It was put out by Cooking Vinyl Records. They did a fantastic job. This is not your run-of-the-mill remastering. This has really lifted it up from where it was and made it all that much more. They've only, as far as I know, I could be wrong, have only done one other remastering and release like this, and it was for Pyramid. And I couldn't believe how much better that sounded than the regular Sony editions of the albums that had been out, remastered back, I don't know, around 2007, I think, somewhere in that time frame. Legacy put them out. And again, Pyramid never clicked with me, but it did when I heard the remastering from Cooking Vinyl. So I was actually very excited about this because I knew that I was not a big fan of this album, and I was hoping that it would do the same, and it did that and more. So if you, like me, were not a big fan of the debut album from Alan Parsons, now's the time to check it out. Okay, this was one that I shared as part of the What Just Dropped episodes that I film and post every Saturday, trying to keep you guys up to date on everything that's coming out. I always throw in some stuff that's not my cup of tea. And this artist would normally be considered that, although I've long since become a fan of hers. And I'm talking about Lady Gaga and her brand new album, Mayhem. So this is not music that I normally show on the channel. Once in a blue moon, an artist like this puts something out that I love. Adele is another one of those artists that I listen to in the pop world that would not be stuff like Ozzy Osbourne and, other progressive rock stuff like we just got done talking about with Alan Parsons and Jethro Tull. But for some reason, I still really enjoy this stuff. And I have a wide taste of music that I listen to, not just getting into this, but I do listen to some jazz, and I listen to some singer-songwriter style stuff, and I listen to some classical, and I listen to, I guess you'd even call it opera with Pavarotti, Placido Domingo, stuff like that, and the classical, listening to Vivaldi and Bach. And so beyond this and Adele and listening to disco stuff like ABBA, the Jacksons, Jackson 5, Michael Jackson. And it's not all coming to mind, and I also have a lot of country artists. So I do listen to a lot of stuff much wider than things that you guys ever hear me talk about on the channel. And that's really because the channel itself is focused around rock, and it is already a wide range of rock topics that get covered on the channel. There really isn't room to throw in the one-off oddity like this. I did think about reviewing it though, because it turned out to be so good. So if you watched the What Just Dropped and you heard me talk about it there, you know that I mentioned that Andrew Watt collaborated with her on the album. And I thought it was just a few tracks here or there. And I think he collaborates on every song except one, the last one, which is a Bruno Mars song. And so that one I don't believe he's on. And I really couldn't find anywhere that said who produced the song specifically, but there's like 3 co-writers for every song. Lady Gaga's one, there was this other person, and then Andrew Watt. And if you don't know who Andrew Watt is, Andrew Watt has come up gaining popularity in production for like Post Malone, and I don't know the other artists, but really contemporary pop, rap, whatever the hip hop, the music of the day, that person became known for. And then he sort of used his clout as that to go and do the kind of music that he was always into growing up. And so that's where he began collaborating with Ozzy Osbourne, Iggy Pop, Pearl Jam, the Rolling Stones. He just did the latest Rolling Stones album, the latest Pearl Jam, the last 2 Ozzy's, the latest Iggy. And I know he's got more out there, but those are the ones that come to mind. But if you want to know where did this guy come from and why do I even care who this guy is, do you guys know California Breed? All right, so California Breed is Glenn Hughes, Jason Bonham, and it's the project they did after Black Country Communion went on hiatus because Joe Bonamassa wanted to go out and tour and make solo albums and do other things. They've since gotten back together and they're doing that, but Jason Bonham, along with Glenn Hughes, decided to form a new group, California Breed. Let me see if there's a photo in here or not. I'll find it if there is. their guitar player that they needed. They did not have Joe Bonamassa. There's Andrew Watt as a young kid. I think he's only a teen at this point, like a late teen, obviously, 18, 19, something of that range, right? Playing along with, there we go, there's 3 photos of them. Glenn Hughes in the middle, Jason Bonham there, and Andrew Watt. So I became a fan of Andrew Watt's guitar playing because of this album here. If you like California Breed, that's exactly what this, or sorry, a Black Country Communion, you're gonna like California Breed. So that's where I became a fan of him. And then 5 years went by and I didn't hear anything about him. And he dropped a solo EP that was as good as this kind of stuff, guitar-driven stuff. And when I looked into what else he was doing, it was not that at all. And I was kind of really bummed out about it. But again, some more time passed. And all of a sudden, his name started to pop up. And I heard him with Post Malone and these other artists. He became a very well-known producer who ultimately, when he first collaborated with Ozzy, I had great hope and excitement for, because Andrew Watt being a guitar player, even if he does this popular style music, I knew he could create some really interesting stuff for Ozzy, and it's just gone from there. So that's why I talk about Andrew Watt so much on this channel, and that's why I am even more interested in this, although I didn't even know when I was buying it how involved he was, or I probably would have been even more excited about getting it. And while this is not a guitar-driven album in any way, shape, or form, every song on here is really good. And usually with Lady Gaga albums, there are 3 or 4 that are really amazing and stand out, and the rest of them are kind of so-so. And then there's a few that I don't like at all. And that has been the case with most of her albums for me. And I only own one other one, Art Pop. But I have to say, this one here, start to finish, is phenomenal. This is now my favorite album by her. Maybe other ones will grow on me, I don't know, but I love this album. It's very much of an 80s style dance kind of sounding album with a lot, of the modern day sounds. There's still the modern day stuff, but it's got that feel that I like, and I guess that's why it can pull me into it. And I think Andrew Watt is just an amazing songwriter that can work in all these different styles. So if you are a Lady Gaga fan, check this out because it is phenomenal. And if you're not a Lady Gaga fan, but you're just curious, check it out. You never know. You might enjoy it as much as I do. All right. And the last thing that I picked up, you saw last week that I was getting into more into the German band Sinner with Matt Sinner, and different projects that Matt Sinner has been a part of, like Primal Fear and other things with Magnus Carlsen and different artists like that he turns up with all the time. If you don't check who's in bands, keep an eye out. This guy who's a bassist, but a singer in his own band, Matt Sinner. So I picked up his one and only solo album, at least as far as I know, it's his only solo album, called Back to the Bullet. I think this is 1991, give or take. This is a reissue, a remastering and a reissue on AFM Records that came out in 2013. This is something that, going back before 2013, I was into, and I could only find streaming copies of this. I couldn't find any physical editions of it. I don't know, well, it must have been issued on CD if it came out in 1991, but just, I guess, very hard to come by. And I was so excited to find that it had been reissued, and not only reissued, but remastered. And Sinner is definitely more on the hard rock side of things than metal side of things, even though Matt Sinner definitely straddles both of those camps equally. But what a great album. If you're a Sinner fan or a Matt Sinner fan, highly recommend this. It is just some cool hard rock, metal leaning style music. So there you go. Just those 5 things. I mean, if you can believe it, that's all that I picked up. But what cool stuff, and how crazy across the board has my listening been with the progressive rock stuff, but on the folk side of things and the more ethereal style stuff, the Pink Floyd's kind of sounding stuff, and then you get regular progressive rock with Pattern Seeking Animals, you get 80s dance pop with Lady Gaga, and hard rock heavy metal with Matt Sinner. And so obviously kept very entertained this past week with those, and then I shot off into other territories and area and pulling out catalogs from these artists because, hey, what point is it for having a 13,000 CD music collection library if you're not going to go pull from that stuff and listen to it. So I was pulling Pattern Seeking Animals and Lady Gaga and Jethro Tull and Sinner to enjoy all that. So even though I only had the 5, I had all this other stuff that was fleshing out my whole listening experience for this past week. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this episode, found it fascinating, interesting in some manner, and maybe helped make a decision about an album that you were on the fence about. But like I said, if nothing else, you can go back to your collection and pull some cool stuff out too and enjoy that. All right, everyone, take care, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.